Okay. Let me just open the source. Okay, hold on 1 second. My source sheet. Okay, ladies, my apologies for the lateness. It was whatever, doesn't matter. Baruch Hashem, we're here now. I'm going to ask you, if at all possible, to please open your cameras, and I think we need more than ever. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Ellen. We need more than ever a feeling of Boker Tov. We need more than ever a feeling of community. I think it's really important that we open up and be together. Okay. Everybody can hear me? Everybody can hear me? Great. Ah, you see your beautiful faces. It makes my day much better. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, I'm subbing for Yael. First of all, the shiur is Le'ilui Nishmat Bracha Odenheimer, Bracha Bat Yaakov Meir V'Sara, Talmidat Matan, a former Matan student, Yehi Zichra Baruch. I would like to also dedicate the shiur. I'm trying to dedicate my shiurim for the foreseeable future to a 5-year-old boy who was murdered, and nobody sat shiva for him because his parents were also murdered. And his name was Eitan Ben Yevgeny. And we should learn Le'ilui Nishmato also, that he should not be forgotten. Okay. This is a really, really hard time to be teaching Torah, I have to say, because it's a very painful and difficult time. And I had a lot of difficulty thinking about what should be the focus of my shiur. And then I realized that there's one thing that always has to be addressed, and certainly now, which is the problem of theodicy. That is to say, tzaddik v'ra, why do bad things happen to good people? Why is evil allowed to triumph? This is a very, very fundamental question that we all have all the time. And in this particular period of time, I think it's even stronger. So I'd like to address that through the Midrash. This issue really arises almost immediately after creation in the story of Cain and Hevel. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. Let me just share the screen here. And let's look at it together. Okay. The first thing we need to do is we have to read through a few psukim so that we can understand what follows in Breshit Rabbah. What we're going to find is that there are two different approaches that are taken to this question, one in Breshit Rabbah and one in Tanhuma. And let's just read it together. Okay. Vayi miketz yamim, and it was at the end of days. Vayaveh Cain mipli ha'adama mincha laHashem. Cain brought from the fruit of the earth an offering to Hashem. Vehevel hevi gamhu, and Hevel also brought mibechorot zonot michel vehen, from the best of his sheep and from their fat. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel el minchato, and Hashem turned to Hevel and to his gift, ve'el Cain, to his offering, ve'el Cain ve'el minchato, and to Cain and to his offering, lo sha'ah, he did not turn. Vayichal leCain ma'od vayiplu panav, and Cain was very upset and his face fell. The word vayichal here doesn't mean anger, it means something more internal, right? Not anger that is expressed. Vayomer Hashem el Cain, and Hashem said to Cain, Lama chara lecha ve'lama naflu panecha? Why are you upset, and why has your face fallen? Halo im tetiv se'et, is it not that if you will do good, it will be lifted up? There are a lot of ways to translate this pasuk. For our purposes, we're not going to spend too much time on it. V'im lo tetiv, and if you do not do good, lapetach chatat rovetz, at the opening, sin crouches. At the opening of your door, so to speak, sin crouches. Ve'elecha chukato v'ata timshol bo, and sin will desire you. To you will be its desire, and you will rule over it. Now, this is a restatement of the fundamental idea, or I think a fascinating statement of the fundamental idea that you have a choice, right? The potential for sin is inside of you, but you can rule over it. And then we get the actual murder of Cain. Vayom of Cain el Hevel achiv, and Cain said to Hevel, his brother, we're not told what he said. Vayhi bihiyotam basadeh, and it was when they were in the field. Vayakam Cain el Hevel achiv vayehargegu, and Cain rose up over Hevel, his brother, and he killed him. And this is what the Midrash is going to focus on the next two psukim. Vayomer Hashem el Cain, and Hashem said to Cain, Ei Hevel achicha, where is Hevel your brother? Okay, that's how Hashem opens his dialogue with Cain. Vayomer lo yadati, and Cain answers, I don't know. Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's guardian? Am I my brother's keeper? And then Hashem answers him, Vayomer me'asita, and Hashem said, what have you done? Kol dmei achicha, the voice of your brother's bloods, so Soakim elai, are crying out to me, min ha'adama, from the earth. Okay, so in the wake of the murder of Hevel, Hashem turns to Cain with the question, where is Hevel your brother? Cain gives an infamous answer. It is the, if you will, symbol. I mean, everybody knows this answer, right? The symbol of the indifference of humanity to humanity, the cruelty, the callousness, lo yadati, right? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's guardian? And Hashem says, what have you done? The voice of your brother's bloods cry out to me. Now, what the Midrash is going to do here is it is going to give us a series of mishalim, a series of parables to explain what's going on in this dialogue. Okay, everybody, we're good? We can see, I'm sorry, my pointer isn't working, so I'm using the cursor in this way. Vayomer Hashem el Cain, and Hashem said to Cain, Ei Hevel achicha v'gomer, where is Hevel your brother? And here the Midrash is going to explain why Hashem starts with the question, or what the significance of the question is, because it's not a true question. Hashem knows where Hevel is. Hashem knows what has happened. Hashem is saying, where is Hevel your brother? It has a rhetorical function. Mashal, this may be compared, li'iparkos, to a hipparch. A hipparch is, it's a Greek word. No, sorry, it's a Roman word, I think. It's a Roman word. And it means, there are different translations I've seen for this. We're going to use the word sheriff, or maybe magistrate would be better. In other words, a person who's in charge of law enforcement in a particular district or region. So that's an iparkos. It's let's say magistrate. Shahaya mahalech be'emtza platya. He was walking in the middle of a wide open space. Think about an empty outdoor parking lot in a huge parking mall, right? And it's big, wide open space. It's an urban space, right? It's not like a big, wide open space in nature, but it's a platya, it's an open space. Matzahu, the magistrate or the sheriff, finds a person who's been killed. In other words, it's not a dead person, it's rather a person on whom I guess there are signs of violence. Ve'echad omed al gabav, and somebody standing over him. Amarlo, the iparkos, the magistrate, said to the man standing over the dead body, Mi harago, who killed him? Ve'amarle, and the passerby, or the person standing over the body, says, Ana ba'ele gabach, I seek him from you, va'ad ba'ele gabi, and you seek him from me, meaning I'm asking you the same question, right? I'm asking you who killed him. I seek him from you. You seek him from me? Amale, so the magistrate says, Lo amalta klum, you have said nothing. Now, this is one of the most mishalim, most parables have a nimshal, a sort of an unpacking of the parable. In this case, there is no such unpacking. We have to fill it in ourselves. Okay, so let's think about the mashal for a moment here. And let's think about the interchange between the two. Somebody's standing over, it's a wide open space. Somebody's standing over a murdered man. And the magistrate, the sheriff, says to him, who killed him? Okay, what is that question meant to mean? Well, it's not a direct accusation, but it is clearly meant to point to the fact that you're standing over a dead body in a place that I don't see anybody else. And this is the way that the magistrate or the sheriff, sort of couches the accusation or sort of opens the conversation. What does the man standing over the body say? I'm asking you, why are you asking me? Right? I'm asking you, why are you asking me? Meaning, you're the law enforcement officer. You're supposed to know. How am I supposed to know? And what does the law enforcement officer say to him? Lo amarta klum, you've said nothing. Okay, so let's go through the different roles that are being played here. And let's think about who is speaking to whom and what's going on here. Who's the iparkos? I could stop the share here. And I don't have the text in front of me. Who's the iparkos? Well, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? God is the iparkos, the magistrate. Okay. And he's walking in the middle of a platya. He's walking in the middle of a wide open space. What does that mean? What's the wide open space? It doesn't say he just found him. It says he's walking in the middle of a wide open space. What does the wide open space indicate? Marcy, what were you going to say?
He's out in the field. He's out.
It's a wide space. It's in an urban setting. What happens if a cop comes across a man standing over a newly dead, newly killed crime victim, right? In a big, fat, empty parking lot with no one else around? What is his conclusion?
That this person was the one who did it.
Yeah. He doesn't see anyone else running away. He doesn't see anyone else in the vicinity. In other words, it's a situation that is transparent. The platya means the empty, big, open, empty space means the transparency of the situation. Or let's put it this way. There are 4 human beings on the planet at this point. Adam and Chava, Cain and Hevel. Yeah? Cain is standing over a newly dead Hevel. That's without us even thinking about the fact that, of course, God knows what happened because he's omniscient, right? So the context is God approaches Cain and says, where is Hevel, your brother? What should Cain assume? That God knows, right? This is not 2 innocent people having a casual conversation. This is not somebody saying, gee, I wanted to talk to your brother. Do you know where he is? Right? It's not like that. This is a situation which is very, very clearly loaded in a way that makes the question, where is Hevel, your brother, a an accusation, essentially, right? You see it, ladies? You see what I'm talking about? In other words, when God says to Cain, "Hey, Hevel achicha, where is Hevel, your brother?" This is not the same, as I said, as I don't know, water cooler conversation. This is a situation where an accusation is being made. Okay, so the platya, the setting of the story is very, very important. Who's the harug? Who's the dead person? Hevel. And the one standing over him, echad omer al gabav, is Cain. The Ibarko says, Mi harago, who killed him? Now, that parallels what in the Pasuk? Well, it parallels God's question, where is Hevel, your brother? So the Midrash is telling us, where is Hevel, your brother, is saying, who killed this man? Or it's an invitation to confession. And what's the answer? Well, the answer is lo yadati. I seek him from you, and you seek him from me. Lo yadati, I don't know. I seek him from you. What's the I seek him from you? Okay, let's go back to the psukim for a moment. What does Cain answer with? Hashomer achi anochi. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, as the Midrash sort of suggests, it's a counter accusation. Who's the guardian? Who should be the guardian? Marcy, you said something, but I didn't hear it. Who's the guardian?
The guardian is Hashem, but it's also the idea that you're connected to your brother. You're part of that, so that you're also.
No. He's saying, I'm not my brother's keeper. Am I my brother's keeper? No, you're my brother's keeper. You're the guardian. You're the cop. You're the magistrate. You're the sheriff. You're asking me who killed him? Your problem, buddy. Right? That's why Cain uses Hashomer achi anochi. If you, God, are the ultimate shomer, right? Why asking me who killed him? It's your problem, it's your responsibility, it's your fault. It's a counter accusation. Who killed this man? I don't know. You're the sheriff, right? So that Cain's answer is not merely an evasion in the Midrashic reading, it's also a counter accusation. Another way to put it is, you didn't stop me. You let this happen. You let this happen, not me. Okay, and this sort of point, and of course God answers, Lo amarta klum. You have said, the Iparkos, the sheriff says, you have said nothing. God's answer is, Kol me'asita, what have you done? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. The voice of your brother's bloods, it's a plural. Demei achicha, bloods. You can't say that in English, but you can say it in Hebrew. Voice of your brother's bloods are crying out to me from the earth. Okay, so that's the first mashal, and it's a sort of overall explanation of this dialogue. Let's go further, because I want to make sure that we have time to also look at Tanchuma. Then there's another mashal. Mashal le'echad shenichnas legina v'likei tutin v'achal. This may be compared to someone who entered a garden and gathered berries and ate them. Okay, that's the beginning, the setting, if you will, of the mashal. V'haya ba'al hagina ratz acharav, and the owner of the garden, the master of the garden, was running after this intruder. Amar lo ma biyadcha. He said to him, "What is in your hands?" Amar lo ein biyadi klum. He said, "I have nothing in my hands." Amar lo. So the owner of the garden said to him, "V'harei yadecha meluchlachot." But here, your hands are dirty. Okay, so we have here another mashal. It at first glance seems like a strange mashal to use for the description of a murder, but we're going to see what the relevance is. Okay, there's There's someone who enters a garden, gathers berries and eats them, and then the owner of the garden is running after him and says, "What's in your hand? What's in your hand?" Okay, and the man says, "I don't have anything in my hand." Why doesn't he have anything in his hands? Because he's eaten them already, right? So the master says to him, the owner of the garden says to him, "But your hands are dirty." Now, this seems like a kind of strange description of a murder, and we're going to have to see what the connection is here. What's the end of the nimshal, the unpacking of the mashal? Kach, thus, Amal lo Kayin lakadosh baruch hu. Kayin said to God, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's guardian? Am I my brother's keeper? Amal lo hakadosh baruch hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, Ha rasha, you wicked person, you evil person. Kol demei achicha tzoakim v'gomer. The voice of your brother's bloods are crying out, etc. Okay, so now let's take a look. Let's follow the pattern of the mashal, and let's think about what's going on here. Echad, who's the echad? Who's the person in this? Who's the actor in this story? Kayin. What's nichnas legina? What does nichnas legina mean? Entered a garden. Okay, a garden is private property. When you enter a garden, you're trespassing. And here the Midrash is telling us that one of the crimes or one of the parts of murder is that a person is trespassing in God's garden. That is to say, in God's jurisdiction. The only being that should have control over life and death is God. When somebody murders somebody else, they're trespassing on God's property or on God's jurisdiction, if you will. Okay, so that's an element of, it sounds almost trivial, but it's part of what's involved in murder, part of what makes murder a sin. Okay, the next element here is liket, where let me just find it. Liket tutin ve'achal. He gathered berries and he ate them. Okay, gathering berries seems like a strange metaphor for murder, right? But what is gathering the berries in someone else's garden? What is it?
Stealing.
It's an act of theft. Taking someone's life is also perhaps the most egregious form of theft. And eating. Why eating?
It shows he didn't care.
That he didn't care. That's true, but I think there's an even more profound message here. What's the problem with eating something? What happens when you eat something? You stole berries. Let's say you didn't eat the berries. What can you do if the owner approaches you?
You could return them. Once you eat them, they're gone.
Once you eat them, they're gone. Eating it shows you that murder is irrevocable. It is irreversible. It cannot be fixed, right? Murder is a sin that cannot be fixed. You know, if you steal somebody's sheep and you sell it to somebody else, you can replace it with another sheep, or you can replace it with money. When you've eaten those berries are gone. You cannot return those berries. Maybe you can pay for the damages. In murder, you can't pay for the damages. It's irrevocable. Kayin kills Hevel and Hevel is gone. So once again, what the Midrash is doing here is it's highlighting the depth, the egregiousness, the wickedness of Kayin's crime. It's a crime of trespass on God's authority. It's a crime of the most horrible form of theft. He has stolen Hevel's life, and it's irrevocable. It cannot be fixed. You cannot, a murderer can do tshuva, but he can't bring back that life that he has taken. Okay, so the owner of the Gina, the owner of the garden is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ratzacharav, he pursues him, right? You know, he approaches him after the killing. And his question is, Ma biyadcha. What does ma biyadcha mean? What is in your hand? How does that parallel a hevel achicha? Well, God knows where Hevel is. He knows Hevel is dead. What is in your hand? He also knows that the berries are gone, right? What is in your hand is a way of saying, what did you take? And it's a way of saying it that, again, opens the conversation. And it is not meant to be taken literally by the thief. What should the thief say? Well, I stole some of your berries. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'll pay for them, whatever he might say. What does he answer? Ein biyadi klum. I have nothing in my hand. Now, this I think is a very clever thing that the Midrash does here, the Mashal does here. God says, where is Hebel, your brother? Right? What does Cain answer? Lo yadati, I don't know. Now, God's question is not meant to be taken literally. But Cain answers it literally. He really does not any longer know where Hevel is. Hevel's gone, right? The spirit that animated Hevel, the soul that was in Hevel, the thing that made Hevel is now a heap of dead meat, right? He doesn't know where Hevel is. And he's trying to deflect God's question by taking it hyper literally. The same thing with the thief here. What does the thief say? The master, the owner of the garden says, what's in your hand? The thief says, I don't have anything in my hand. Of course you don't have anything in your hand. You ate it already. And how does the master answer him? But your hands are dirty. Your hands are dirty. What does that correspond to? What does HaKadosh Baruch say to Cain? Cain says, after God says, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? Hashem says, Kol dimei achicha, soakim elai min ha'adama. The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the earth. In other words, God chooses his words very carefully. That's the reason berries are used. Berries are used in the strawberries are not native to the Middle East. We're talking about some kind of blackberry, mulberry, something that's dark. You steal berries, your hands get stained, right? They become dark. What is God saying? The blood, right? The staining by the berries corresponds to the blood on the hands. You have blood on your hands. Don't tell me you don't know where your brother is. Don't tell me you don't know what you've done, right? That you can't get away with that. Okay, ladies, are you following my methodology here? You following what I'm doing here? Okay, so let's go back now to the next mashal. As you can see, we have a series of mishalim here. The next mashal, and of course, we always have to ask, what does each mashal add, right? We're noticing that the first mashal gives us the nuance of Cain's answer, right? The decision to say, am I my brother's keeper, guardian? You're the guardian. It's a counter-accusation. The second mashal, in addition to showing us other aspects of the crime of murder, is also emphasizing the staining of the hands and how that can't be washed away. That you can hide the body, you can't hide the fact. Okay, let's go on. This may be compared to someone who entered a pasture. A pasture, like a garden, is private property, right? There are open areas where all sorts of animals can graze, but there are also pastures that belong to owners, and a mir'eh is a piece of private property. So this may be compared to someone who entered a pasture, v'chataf gedi echad, and he snatched a kid, a baby goat. And the word chataf means to snatch, to grab. V'hivshilo la'achorav, he slung the goat behind him, slung the kid behind him. If you've ever seen how shepherds carry goats, they put the goat with the front legs here and the back legs here, and they hold them over their back, right? V'haya ba'al hamir'eh ratz acharav, and the owner of the pasture was running after him. Amar lo, he said to him, Ma biyadecha, what is in your hand? Amar lo, ein biyadi klum. He said, I have nothing in my hand. Amar lo, v'harehu maf'eh acharecha. And the owner says, but here he is bleating, right? He's meh behind you, right? He's bleeding behind you. Kach amar hakadosh baruch hu leKayin. Thus God said to Cain, Kol demei achicha begomel, the voice of your brother's blood, etc. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what does this mashal add? Because after all, we've already had the mashal of the theft. We've already had the irrevocability, right? We've had all of that. So what does this mashal add? Okay, wait, before I go on, any questions before I go on? We're good? It's very frustrating because I have to share the screen, but then I can't see you. So I'm just checking in periodically here. Okay, let's go back. Okay, let's find it. So let's find what we have here. So the echad, who's the person who enters the pasture, is Cain. Again, murder is an act of trespass. Okay, chataf, he snatched. And here we move closer to the actual picture of murder. What does chataf mean? Snatched. What does that stand for?
Without permission.
Without permission, but think of it from the perspective of the animal that is snatched. A kid is a little animal. You snatch it. What does it experience?
Fear, pain.
Fear and pain. In other words, the snatching stands for the violence. And here I think the mashal adds something extremely important, in addition to what it goes on to tell us. In the first mashal, we have the murder of a dead person. We have a person who's been murdered, but we don't see that violence. We come upon it in the aftermath. And if you look at the psukim, by the way, and this is in general true of Tanakh, there aren't many violent descriptions in Tanakh. A person is attacked and dies. We don't hear the screams. We don't see the blood. Or let's put it this way. In Western literature is very, very visual, right? In other words, you get descriptions of how people look, how the setting, what the setting appears. There's color, there's sound, there's descriptions of people's screams, etc. We don't have that in Tanakh. Tanakh states the facts in a very, very bare way. Even the murder of Cain, it just says Cain says something to Hevel, and he rises up over him and he kills him. This mashal is filling in the fact that, of course, murder is violent. And we know that the victim is suffering because what does it do? The gdi, the kid, maf'eh acharav. It's bleeding, it's crying out, it's expressing its distress. In other words, what we're given here is a picture of the effect of the murder on the person who is murdered, who's killed, okay? So let's keep going. So the person who enters the mir'eh, the pasture, by the way, Cain kills Hevel in the field. It does say sadeh, in the field. He has trespassed on God's private property. He has committed an act of violence. That's the chataf that we have here. What is hifshilo acharav? Slung it behind him. What does it mean that he slung it behind him? He threw it over his back. What does that mean? I think the Midrash is here telling us that Cain is putting it behind him. He doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't want to look at it. He doesn't want to anything, right? It's like he's throwing it behind him. The master of the pasture, of course, is Hakadosh Baruch who pursues him and says, "Ma biyadecha," what is in your hand? Which is the equivalent of A Hevel achicha, where is Hevel your brother? What does he answer? Ein biadi klum. I have nothing in my hand. Lo yadati, right? I don't know. I know what you're talking about. Ein biadi klum. I have nothing in my hand. This is the same answer that is given to the owner of the garden, right? I have nothing in my hand. And then the master says, but here he is bleating behind you. He's bleating behind you. And what does that correspond to, ladies? In the pasuk, let's go back to our pasuk. Pasuk Yud. Me asita. What does it correspond to? Kol. The voice of your brother's bloods are crying out to me from the earth. Okay, so here the mashal elucidates the crime in a way that makes us much more conscious of the violence involved, because berries, when they're eaten, don't suffer, right? We don't worry about berries. Like, there's no reaction on the part. The focus is on the blood on the hands, right? Here we have two things I think that distinguish this mashal from the previous one. The first is the violence, the suffering of the victim, the pain, the fear, right? Which is not described in the Torah. But the second thing that is being emphasized here is the chutzpah of the murderer. Because theoretically, if a person keeps his hands closed, nobody would see the blood, right? Nobody would see it. Nobody would see the staining by the berries, right? And he literally doesn't have anything in his hands. Well, here he doesn't have anything in his hands per se, but the victim of the crime is visible, right? And you try denying, well, that kid, what are you talking about? That baby girl? Oh, I don't know how it got there, right? It's like completely arrogant isn't even the right word, brazen. It's completely brazen to stand in front of the owner and say, I know what you're talking about. I don't have anything in my hand. I didn't take any goat. And the goat is crying and bleating and squirming or whatever the goat would be doing right behind you. Now, it's the arrogance, or arrogance isn't even the right word. Arrogance would be haughtiness, the brazenness, the chutzpah of saying, I don't know where my brother is. It's not my problem, right? When it is clear that God knows exactly what happened to his brother. So we have three different mishalim here that illuminate different aspects of the text in, I think, a very, very profound way. Okay. And now let's go back to our text here. And we are going to skip the next part, which I'll just show you what it is. This part is talking about the fact that dam is used in the plural here. We're going to skip this piece. I'm just going to summarize it for you, this piece over here. As you can see, the Midrash in Breshit Rabbah is anatomizing the dialogue, right? First, in the story of the sheriff, it explains God's question. It explains Cain's God's question is, where is your brother? Cain's counter accusation, you're the guardian. Then we focus on the blood, the red on the blood on the hands, the voice of the kid that is crying out, which is Hevel's unheard voice, Hevel screams. And then the Midrash concentrates on the words Dimei achicha, the bloods of your brother, in the plural. And based on three different stories in Tanakh, this one and two others, it explains that it says bloods in the plural because the murder of a person is also the murder of any, or the end of any potential children they might have had. So Damo, his blood, the Dam Zariotav, and the bloods of his descendants. So when Cain killed Hevel, he also cut off the line of Hevel. And that's why bloods is in the plural. Now we're going to come to, I think, the most difficult part of our mashal, and this is going to require some thinking. And here we get a rather shocking statement. Okay, wait, let me just take any questions. Any questions before, hang on, everybody turned off there. Oh, no, you're all there. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay, let's go on. So now we're going to look at the last mashal in Breshit Rabbah, and it says the following. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, Kasher hadavar le'omro, the thing is hard to say, V'i efshar lapeh lefarsho, and it is impossible for the mouth to explain it. Now this is a very rare statement in Chazal. As far as I know, there is no other such statement, at least in Midrash, as far as I know, which doesn't mean there isn't. But it's a statement that is almost like, today they do sensitivity warnings, right? On certain kinds of articles or news reports. You know, this may be a distressing thing for you to see. You know what I'm talking about? That's something that is done now. It's almost like lahavdil, because Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was not being politically correct. He's saying, I'm about to say something that is very hard to say, and that I can't explain, or that can't be explained. Okay, and here's the mashal. Lishnei atletim, this may be compared to two athletes, shahayu omdim umitgoshishim lifnei hamelech, who were standing and wrestling in front of the king. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's world is one in which there is the cruelty of the Roman circus, right, or the Colosseum or whatever, the stadium, where two athletes stand and wrestle before the king. If he wanted to, the king could separate them. But the king did not want to separate them. One of them overcame his friend and killed him. And the dying man was crying out. Ve'amar, and he said, Man yive dini kedam malka, who will demand my judgment before the king? Okay, let's explain the situation here. This is the two gladiators are wrestling in front of the king. And at any point in this gladiatorial contest, the king can stop the fight. But the king doesn't want to do that. King doesn't want to do that. One of them rises up over his friend and kills him. And the dying man cries out and says, who will demand my judgment from the king? Which means, what is the dying man doing here? What's the dying man? Who's the dying man accusing here? Who is the dying man accusing of his death?
The king.
Dying man is accusing the king. So let's think about this. Two athletes. Who are the two athletes? No, ladies.
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Hevel. Okay. Mitgoshishim lifnei hamelech. They are wrestling in front of the king. That means what's happening there? They're fighting in front of, in the presence of God. God, right? God's the king. Okay.
Simi,
Yeah.
maybe an annoying comment, but
I don't want
I-
comments. We have to first analyze it. Hold on to the comment afterwards, okay? Hold on to the comment. Hold on.
okay,
Let's
okay,
finish the mashal, okay? So the king is God. They're wrestling, they're fighting, right? Cain wrestles with his brother. He overcomes him and he kills him. That's the mashal. And what does Hebel say? Who will demand my judgment from the king? Where does the Midrash get this from? Hold on. Let's take a look at the pasuk here. Kach. Thus, kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'atama. It doesn't say the voice of your brother's blood cries out from the earth, but rather the voice of your brother's blood cries out to me, God says to Cain, right? Hevel's blood is crying out to me from the earth. Why? Because I didn't stop his murder. I did not stop his murder, right? I let it happen. You, Cain, have made me an accomplice in the murder of your brother. And here we have to look at the other thing in the mashal that we didn't look at. Ilu ratzah hamelech pershan. If the king had wanted to, he could have divided them. He could have separated them. V'lo ratzah hamelech pershan. The king did not want to separate them. Now, in all the previous mishalim that we've looked at here, the king is a sheriff or a magistrate. He's the owner of a garden. He's the owner of a field, right? Here he's the king. Here he's the king, right? And king is a man with absolute power. He could have stopped it. He didn't stop it. We begin to understand why Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says the thing is difficult to say and it is impossible for the mouth to explain it. What's he saying here? God is complicit in the murder of Hevel. Or this is, I think, the most powerful statement I have seen of Tzaddik viralo virasha v'tovlo, right? Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Why does God, that's the big theological question if you believe in God, it is maybe the only theological question if you believe in God. Why does God permit the murder of the innocent? Why does God permit the wicked to flourish and to do whatever they want? Why? So let's go back for a moment, and we're gonna look at this, but we're also going to look at a different take on the same question, Tanhuma. So let's just think about this for a minute. Why doesn't God? Good question. Cain is in the act of killing his brother. Why doesn't God stop him? Why? Any thoughts?
When do we have freedom of all the whatever? Do we have the decision by Hashem to give freedom of choice to people? That human beings were going to have freedom.
Okay, so basically the definition of humanity is free will. That's what separates us from the angels, and that separates us from the animals. Okay, what happens if God intervenes here?
We don't have free will.
What puppet?
We
If
don't.
If we're just puppets, then we can't get credit and we can't get blame.
We're just puppets. We're just animals or angels. We're not people. In other words, it's a very painful thing to say. It's a terrible thing to say. But the price of free will is that human beings can do very bad things. They can also do magnificent things, incredible things, beautiful things. The reason I thought,
Simi,
yeah.
Doesn't it also imply that Hashem has complicity? Or that the king has complicity?
No, the way Rashbi is reading it, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is reading this story is he says, God himself in the Torah says, the voice of your brother's bloods, kol demei achicha, tzoakim elai, to me, right? They're crying out at me. They're accusing me. In other words, yes, God does let the wicked triumph. Why? Because otherwise there would be no such thing as good or evil or human choice or anything else. That's the price. Is God happy about it in Rashbi's reading? No, he points out that word, a lie to me. You know, what have you done? You've made me a murderer, is what essentially is what God says to Cain. The voice of your brother's bloods cry out to me.
Excuse me, I have a question about a word you used. When you use the word angel, I don't, it felt like it was being used in the Christian sense, because our malach is a messenger from God.
Malach
And
doesn't have free will. A malach doesn't have free will. That's what distinguishes.
right, but you use the word angel as if we're
I use the word angel, but it's the English translation. In other words, I'm not, this is not a Christian conception of angels. What I'm just saying is that we have divine aspects and we have animal aspects, right? And what distinguishes us is our capacity to choose. Neither the malach nor the animal can choose. You can't talk about an evil dog, right? It's a dog. It's not, it just operates in terms of its own nature. You can't talk about a lizard is evil. A lizard may be a very unpleasant animal. It may be a dangerous animal. A tiger isn't evil. It could rip you apart and it still wouldn't be evil. It's just a tiger, right? It's not choosing, it's being an animal, right? When you talk about a human being that rips apart another person, then you're talking about evil because a human being has a choice. Now, basically, what very starkly appears in Bereshit Rabbah is that the problem of theodicy makes its appearance, the problem with Tzadik Piralo makes its appearance very, very early in the creation story. Cain attacks Hevel for no apparent reason, certainly not for a good reason, right? And Hevel is an innocent victim. He certainly did not deserve to die. It's almost like we're being shown God's thought processes here. If he intervenes, the meaning of human choice is completely knocked out of the water, right? Humanity, to be a human being, to make the choices, to take responsibility for choices, that's going to be completely removed. Is it a happy, comfortable thought? No, it really isn't. Is it the terribly high price we pay to be human? Yeah, it is. Now, what's interesting is if you take a look at, we only have a few more minutes. I just want to look at this as well. In the version of this that appears in Tanhuma, because Tanhuma says something, offers a similar kind of picture here, and we don't have time to do this justice, but I want to read it through with you and just point out certain features of it. Okay, so in Tanhum we get a longer description here. We're starting in the middle of a longer description, as you can see from the ellipsis. Kevan shamar lo hakadosh baruch hu, when God said to Cain, "Ei Hevel achicha, where is Hevel your brother?" Amar lo, he said to him, "Lo yadati, I don't know." Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's guardian? Am I my brother's keeper? Ata shomer kol habriot, you are the guardian of all creatures. V'ata mevaksho miyadi, and you seek him from me? Right? That's implicit in the one we read earlier in Bereshit Rabbah, right? About the magistrate. Mashal lema hadavar domeh. To what may, sorry, ladies, to what may this be compared? Leganav sheganav kelim balayla velo nitpas. To a thief who stole vessels in the night and was not caught, right? The protagonist here is a thief who stole things and was not caught. Labokel, in the morning, tifaso hashoer, the gatekeeper caught him. The gatekeeper catches the thief. Amaulo, lama ganafta et hakelim. The gatekeeper says, why did you steal the vessels? By the way, that's very different from Ei Hevel achicha. Ei Hevel achicha, where is Hevel your brother, is a very indirect accusation. It's an invitation to confession. This question, as Tanhuma poses it, is a direct accusation. The accusation is, you stole the vessels. Why did you steal the vessels? It sharpens the Ei Hevel achicha question, where is Hevel your brother question. It turns it from a an indirect accusation to an explicit accusation. What is Cain's answer, according to Tanhuma? Amar lo, ani ganav. He said, I'm a thief. I'm a thief. Velo hinachti umanuti. And I did not lay down, I did not leave aside my profession. Avalata, but you, umanutcha bashar lishmor, your profession is to watch at the gate. Lama hinachta umanutcha va'achshav ata omer li kach. Why did you leave your profession and now you say this to me? Ve'av Cain kachamar, and thus Cain said, Ani harati oto, I killed him. Barata b'yetzer hara, you gave me an evil inclination. Ata shomer et hakol, you guard everything. V'li hinachta oto lehorgo, and me, you let me kill him. Afata shaharagto, even you are the one who killed him. Shenikreta anochi, because you are called anochi, right? Hashomer achi anochi, you're the anochi. She'ilu kibalta korbani kimoto, if you had accepted my korban like his, lo hayiti mitkanebo, I would not have been jealous of him. Miyad heshivo, immediately God answered him, Me'asita, what have you done? Kol demei achicha tzoakim. The voice of your brother's blood is crying out. Now this Cain is quite possibly, in the way that Midrash Tanhuma portrays it, the onus is really placed on Cain, not on God, right? If we go back to the biblical story, before this crime, before this terrible sin happens, right? Cain is jealous of Hevel because of the korban. And in Tanhuma, it makes a connection between the jealousy and the murder. And Hashem says to Cain, Lama chara lecha v'lama naflu panecha? Why are you upset and why has your face fallen? Halo im tetiv se'et. If you will do good, it will be lifted up, it will be forgiven. V'im lo tetiv, and if you don't do good, la peta chatat rovetz. Sin will crouch at your door. Ve'elecha chukato, and it will desire you. Ve'atatim sholbo, and you will rule over it. In other words, God tells Cain, yes, you have negative feelings, you have bad stuff in you, but you can control that. You can choose otherwise. What does Cain do? He goes out and murders his brother. The context is God gives us the choice. I'll tell you a little story here. I know it's going to sound a little trivial under the circumstances. My daughter was she must have been about 11, 12. She said to me, Mommy, how come I have to daven every day? She meant like, why do I have to daven, shacharit and mincha? She said, my great-grandmother didn't daven every day. And indeed, her great-grandmother did not daven every day. So she said, it's because I can read, right? That's why I have to daven every day. She's a smart kid. She's still a very smart cookie. What was she saying? Her great-grandmother was illiterate. She didn't know how to read. My grandmother, her great-grandmother was illiterate. She learned how to read only after she got married. Her husband taught her how to read. This was not uncommon in Eastern Europe, in certain communities. She didn't daven from a sitter. She davened every day, probably a very shortened tefillah, orally, but she didn't daven every day. My daughter had the benefit of a full Jewish education. She knows how to read. She has to daven, okay? Cain, okay, it sounds trivial, but it's not. When you have the knowledge that you have free will, it's up to you what you do with it. What do you mean, I'm the guardian of everything? You chose to be a thief, right? I did not, he says, the thief in the Mashal says, I did not abandon. Here it is, where are we? I'm a thief and I did not abandon my profession. You made yourself a thief. Our sympathies are not with Cain here. We don't look at Cain here with any kind of, oh, poor guy in our minds. Barata b'yetzer hara, he says to God in this version. Ani harati oto, I killed him. Barata b'yetzer hara. I killed him. You made me with the yetzer hara. You gave me an evil inclination. And you let me kill him. What's the answer to Cain? The answer that we should give him? You could have chosen otherwise. You could have chosen to be somebody else. You have responsibility for your actions. And here Tanhuma does something else that's very, very interesting. Tzoakim Elai, on the words Tzoakim Elai, the voice of your brother's bloods are crying out to me. Tzoakim Alai, they're yelling at me, right? Mashal l'shnayim she'asu meriva, this may be compared to two people who had a quarrel. Harag echad mehen et chavero. One of them killed his friend. Haya bahen shlishi v'lo hifrish beinehem. There was a third person there who did not separate between them. Al mi hakol misichin. Who does everybody talk about? Lo al hashlishi, the passerby, the third person who was standing there. In this mashal, God is not the king in the stadium who sets up the situation and doesn't intervene and allows one gladiator to kill the other. Here, God is a passerby, right? God is there watching. And yes, we may say, why didn't you stop him? But whose responsibility is it that one killed the other? Who's really responsible? The killer. The killer. God chooses to limit his malchut. He chooses to limit his absolute control over our destiny for the sake of giving us our dignity. And that is won at an extremely high price, but it enables us existentially to be human. And if you look at what's happening now, and we don't want to look at what's happening now, there are two things happening simultaneously. We are seeing unspeakable atrocities. Unspeakable. I don't even want to think about it. I'm sure none of you want to think about it. It's there. It's not going away. It's not the first time in human history. It's not going to be the last time in human history. Unspeakable atrocities go on all the time because human beings are capable of unspeakable atrocity. We could make a list. And at the same time, we are seeing acts of unimaginable heroism. We are seeing acts of magnificent chesed and love and giving and care. And that's also, we're not looking at that, but that's also part of being human. And the only thing that makes those acts possible is that we have free will. The only thing, the price is astronomical, extremely painful. And unfortunately, many people choose evil. Small ways, big ways. But you know what? It's not God's fault. Okay, you could argue God shouldn't have created it. That's my daughter. That was another thing my daughter once said to me. During the Intifada, she said, Mommy, why does Hashem let them kill us this way? I said, it's not Hashem. There are some bad people. And she was young. She was really young. She said, there are bad people and they make certain choices because they have Bechira Chofshit. Hashem gave us Bechira Chofshit. And she said, what do we need Bechira Chofshit for? So I said, well, if we didn't have Bechira Chofshit, we would either be malachim or we'd be animals. So she said to me, what would be so bad? That's what she said. I think we sometimes feel that way. I said, I'd rather be a person, personally. I'd rather be a person. this is a raw, terrible time, and I'm not taking this at all lightly. I don't know anybody who hasn't been scarred by this, either directly or indirectly, or just, I think as a collective, we are in agony. The whole country is in agony, and a lot of Jews in Chutz La'aretz are terrified and also in agony. But I think about what was happening before the war. We were ripping each other apart, and I'm not taking political sides here. I really am not. I think there was enough blame to spread around on both sides, on either side. If there was only two sides, there may have been more. But something, and I'm not saying that this happened because of that. I'm not a Navi or a Neviah. I don't pretend to understand why this happened. There's lots of different ways to explain what happened. Some of it had to do with choices that our enemies made, and some of it had to do with failure of vigilance on our side. And you can describe the situation as so complex, it can be understood in so many different ways. But one thing is totally clear. This is part of being human too. This free will, the fact that we have this horrific situation, and the fact that people choose to do terrible, unimaginably terrible things, and that people choose to do unimaginably wonderful things. That's part of Bechira Chofshit. If God intervenes, it takes away our agency, it takes away our dignity, it makes us stop being human. So we can still ask the question, right? Rashbi, the way he states it is, Hevel accuses God and God feels accused, in the way that Rashbi understands it in the mashal of the gladiators, right? Well, I think we just have to ask ourselves, what am I going to do? What are we going to do as a society? What are our choices? What do we do about this? And I think that's all we can do. Anyway, Besorot Tovot. Any questions before we end? Oh, what a beautiful painting. Look at that. Okay. Yeah, Ellen?
It's your inspiration. I'm painting as you talk. Thank you.